Hey, Mr. Wiedemer here. Welcome to Mr. Wiedemer's History. And today, we're going to learn about the rise of segregation. Now, we thought Unit 1 was over with. But guess what? There's a lost file in Unit 1. This is Unit 1.5, the rise of segregation. Now, you guys be able to explain segregation in the South after the Civil War and how it affected the nation. But first, a few tidbits that I forgot to mention earlier, such as Congress. Now, they wanted to uphold the property rights of the South, so what they're going to do is actually return the land they confiscated back to the Confederates, the former Confederates. Actually, they'll get their land back. And so that's a good thing Congress did there. And also, it goes along with segregation, that Congress is going to pass many civil rights laws to try to abolish the black code, to try to abolish the Jim Crow laws. So many civil rights laws for that. And also a term that I may have mentioned, may have forgot, I'm not for sure, but it's very important for Unit 1, which is scalawag. Alright, scalawag sounds like a derogatory term because it is. It's basically a person who sympathized with the North. They lived in the South and they're Union sympathizer. And a lot of these people were, the poor farmers who didn't want the rich planter elite to regain power in the South. So that's a few background information that I, had to tell you this. And so now back onto the rise of segregation in the South. Alright, so there is a video here. Alright, if you want to click on that. Alright, there's a video you can be found on the YouTube channel underneath videos in class. It's a pretty good video on segregation. Many African Americans, alright, they're going to try to resist this oppression put on them. They're going to flee, like we talked about earlier with the Great Migration. Alright, but many who stayed are going to join this thing called the Populist Party. Now, the Populist Party wasn't formed until 1891, but the African Americans really identified with what the Populist Party stood for, which was interest of farmers and laborers, which hence that's pretty much what all free African Americans were in the South. Many of them, at least, were farmers and laborers. So in the mid-1870s, we got this guy named Pap Singleton. Alright, this dude right here, Pap Singleton. Now, he says, as long as the African Americans stay in the South, they'll never get a chance. They'll never get a fair shake. And you need to move out of the South. We need to get out. Alright, he's one of the guys who kind of spearheads this Great Migration. We're going to move out. Now, he gets people to move to Kansas. Yes, the great state of Kansas. Alright, he urged many African Americans to move there, and this is a mass exodus of African Americans moving west as part of the Great Migration. Many found jobs there. And these people are going to be called exodusters because, hence the exodus. Alright, and he's also going to help the Kansas farmers. They're going to form the American Farmers, the Colored Farmers National Alliance to help out the African American farmers in Kansas. Now here's a map of the exodusters. As you can see, all throughout the South, they're going to move to Kansas, and some to Oklahoma as well, but move to Kansas, move west. Alright, that's what it's all about, moving west, getting out of the South. Alright, Pap says it ain't happening. You ain't getting any rights in the South. We got to leave. And so many of them did. Right. Next up, we come to segregation. Alright, segregation. The famous words of, I can't think of the guy's name, George Wallace, Southern governor. Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. Alright, yeah, the South really loves their segregation. It really starts after the freedom slaves. Now the freedmen, they're free African Americans, and they're still going to be discriminated against a lot. So, these southern states, they're going to pass many laws to impose this segregation. Now, segregation, what segregation is a separation. All right, separation of races. All right, similar to the apartheid in South Africa. All right, in the 20th century. But the segregation, the separation of races. Now, this segregation lasts from 1865 until 1964. Yeah, nearly 100 years of segregation in the South. It becomes a Southern way of life. And not only are we going to segregate them, but we're going to try to make sure that African Americans do not get the right to vote. And this is really, really bad. Really bad. See here, Plessy v. Ferguson, we'll talk about that later. Basically separate but equal, it says, but in this thing, separate but not equal. It's kind of how it was. The whites in the South got the newest, latest, and greatest. They got the the clean, the best new movie theaters, restaurants, and whatnot. And the African Americans, they get the leftover scraps. Not good at all. Alright, so the Democratic Solid South really forms during this time, and it really starts after the Civil War, where radical Republicans in charge, and they kind of come down and impose their will on the South, and Democrats rise up against them. All right, and so really from 1865 till civil rights is over in 1964, they really have a Democratic Solid South. You can really see this on all the presidential maps, that it's really democratic, really democratic. Now, many African Americans also joined the Populist Party, like I said, they identified with it, but this really ticked off the Southern Democrats, and so they're going to now make sure that the poor white people don't side with the Populist Party, so the party that the African Americans joined don't gain power, and so the Democrats will continue to have power. Right? Not a good deal. Not a good deal. Right? So, late 1800s, Southern states, not only are they going to be segregated, but we're going to restrict voting rights. Now you ask, how can that be? The Constitution, 15th Amendment, says that all African Americans have the right to vote. Yes, it does. But it doesn't say how easily they would have this right to vote. And so the South kind of worms their way through this 15th Amendment and imposes limits, imposes strict laws and clauses that in their state constitutions that basically make it nearly impossible for African Americans to actually vote. So they're not breaking the Constitution, because the African Americans have the right to vote, but it's nearly impossible. Now, none greater than the great state of Mississippi, who basically has 3 different clauses, 3 strikes you're out. The first thing Mississippi does is put in a poll tax, which basically says $2 and you can vote. Well, many poor African Americans don't have $2 to spare to go vote, so they're out of there. Next up, literacy test. You must learn how to read. You must understand the state constitution in order to vote. Well, many poor African Americans did not have education, despite the efforts of the Freedmen's Bureau, radical Republicans, getting schools in the South after Civil War during Reconstruction. It's still, they can't know how to read, and so strike 2. All right, strike 3, the grandfather clause. Now, this is a doozy here. Basically, if you have an ancestor that could vote before January 1 of 1867, then you can vote. But if not, sorry. And do you really think many African Americans that could vote before 1867? Yeah, no. So, strike 1, strike 2, strike 3. If one doesn't get you, the other one will. And so it makes it nearly impossible for African Americans to vote in the South. And many other states are going to adopt this as well, and voting turnout for African Americans skydives dramatically, goes nowhere. Now, this was not fixed until the Voting Rights Act of 1965, like 100 years until they get what they need. And so African Americans in the North were often barred. Yes, the North had segregation as well, not as bad as the South. The South was far worse, lasted far longer, and it just wasn't a good idea. Many of these based off the Jim Crow laws, the black codes. So see, there's Jim Crow. We've talked about him before. This Southern guy. That's how the Southerners viewed African Americans, as Jim Crow. And so the Supreme Court's going to get involved. You think, yay, the Supreme Court's going to help out the Southern African Americans. You'd be wrong. For one, 1883, the Supreme Court's going to overturn the Civil Rights Act of 1875. Southern states then pass a series of laws that's going to radically increase segregation, especially with Plessy versus Ferguson. Now, this is a Supreme Court case, one of the most important ones in all of American history. Know this case. Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. They're synonymous. Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. Basically means that African Americans and white Americans are equal. All men are created equal. But you can separate them. Alright, like this Plessy guy who is a 1/8 African American, and he goes into Louisiana streetcar, the railroad car, and he gets arrested for it. Ends up going to the Supreme Court, and he loses. Separate but equal. Separate but equal, Plessy Ferguson. Remember that. Alright, so some African Americans need to respond. We need something more. We need to end segregation. So, one thing that happened was not good was lynchings. Alright, these lynchings, as this picture is hard to watch, were mass group beatings of African Americans. They didn't do anything wrong. They're going to get beat just because they're African Americans. And an average of 187 a year in the 1890s, not good. Craziness. Now we have people like Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell, who's going to help try to end this racism and help women's rights, African American women's rights. Alright, she helps establish the NAACP along with Du Bois. We'll talk about here on the next slide. Alright, so lynching, horrible thing going on. These women are helping out as well. Alright, and so we're going to have two views of how to achieve civil rights. Alright, first one, Booker T. Washington. Alright, this is Booker T right there. And Booker T, he proposed that African Americans work for their rights. Hard work, education. You will eventually achieve your rights. You will eventually get your civil rights you need. So, work hard, get educated. That's what Booker T is all about. And then he has his opponent, W.E.B. Du Bois, who is a lawyer, Harvard-educated lawyer. And this lawyer is going to say, no, we need our rights, and we need them now. And we're going to go to the courts, and we're going to get our rights. So, we have Washington, work hard, alright, you will eventually get civil rights. And Du Bois is like, civil rights now. And I'm going to court for it. So, a little bit of review of this lesson here. Alright, segregation in the South. Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Alright, about 100 years of segregation here after the Civil War. Many Southern African Americans joined the Populist Party. They identified with that. African Americans moved to Kansas, part of mass exodus, become exodusters. This mass migration, alright, this great migration. And the Democratic Solid South, which lasted nearly 100 years as well, makes it hard for African Americans to vote. We have poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses. I mean, these things basically make it impossible for African Americans to vote in the South. Group beatings, lynchings occur, craziness, and people get away with murder. How are we going to end this? Two different views. Booker T. Washington, hard work and education, and W.E.B. Du Bois, fight for your rights in court, fight for your rights now. Alright, so that ends Unit 1. I'm Mr. Wiedemer. Until next time, study hard.